Alara sat in the small stone room, her hands folded tightly in her lap, listening to the voices coming through the thin wooden door. She could not see her father's face, but she did not need to. She could hear the shake in his voice, the way it dropped low with shame. "The debt is too great," he said. "If she marries the king, the pack survives. If she does not, we lose everything." The man he spoke to did not argue. Papers rustled, a pen scratched against parchment, and just like that, Alara's future was decided without a single word from her. She had been blind since birth, but she had never once thought of herself as broken. She could hear a storm forming an hour before it arrived. She could tell a lie from truth by the way a person's breath caught. She had learned to live in a world of sound, scent, and feeling, and in many ways, she understood people better than those who could see them. But none of that mattered now. She was to be sent away to marry a stranger, a king, a man known across the land as cold, unfeeling, and dangerous. King Draven Ashgrave of Valemore. The journey to the palace took 3 days. Alara did not cry. She had promised herself long ago that she would not waste tears on things she could not change. Instead, she listened. She listened to the wheels of the carriage turning beneath her, to the guards murmuring about the king's temper, to the wind changing as they crossed from her small, poor village into the grand, powerful kingdom that would now be her home. When she arrived, she was led into a large hall. She could feel the size of the room by the way sound moved through it, echoing far above her head. Hundreds of people stood around her, their scents mixing together, curious and murmuring, and then she felt him. She did not need eyes to know when King Draven entered the room. The air itself seemed to shift. Conversations stopped. Even the servants' footsteps grew quieter, as though afraid to be noticed. His presence was heavy, powerful, commanding. "This is her?" His voice was deep and flat, without warmth. "Yes, Your Majesty," someone answered. "Alara, of the Thornwood Pack." There was a long pause. Alara stood still, chin lifted, refusing to shrink beneath his gaze even though she could not return it. "She's blind," Draven said, as though stating a simple fact. "She carries the healing bloodline, Your Majesty. It was in the agreement." Another pause. Alara felt something pass through the room, though she could not name it. Then Draven's footsteps came closer, slow and deliberate, until he stood directly in front of her. "Give me your hand," he said. She lifted her hand, and his fingers wrapped around it. The moment their skin touched, she felt him go still, completely still. His breath caught, sharp and sudden, and for a heartbeat, the whole room seemed to hold its breath with him. She did not know what had happened, but she knew something had changed. Inside Draven, his wolf had risen with a force he had not felt in years. Mate. The word echoed through him, unwanted and undeniable. He had not scented her before this moment. He had agreed to this marriage only for politics, for the healing bloodline his kingdom desperately needed after years of war. He had never intended to feel anything for the woman he was forced to marry. And yet his wolf recognized her instantly, as though it had been waiting for her his entire life. Draven released her hand quickly, stepping back, his jaw tight. He did not understand it, and he did not want to. He had loved once before, and that love had ended in betrayal and loss. He had built walls around his heart so thick that even his own wolf had gone quiet for years. He was not prepared for those walls to crack now, especially not for a woman chosen for him by a contract, not by choice. "The wedding will take place tomorrow," he said, his voice hard again. "See that she is prepared." He turned and walked away, leaving Alara standing alone in the hall, her heart pounding, unsure of what had just passed between them, only certain that something had. The wedding was simple and quiet, more a formality than a celebration. Alara wore a gown she could not see but could feel, soft and heavy against her skin. She stood beside Draven as vows were spoken, her hand in his once more. His grip was firm, careful, as though he were holding something breakable, though his face, she was told later, showed nothing at all. After the ceremony, Draven barely spoke to her. He assigned her a chamber far from his own and told the staff to see to her needs. He did not visit her that night, or the next. Alara told herself she did not mind. She had not expected warmth from a marriage built on debt and duty. Still, in the quiet of her new room, she found herself listening for his footsteps in the hallway, wondering about the strange stillness that had passed through him when they first touched. The palace was not unkind to her, but it was not welcoming either. The servant spoke to her carefully, unsure how to treat a queen who could not see. The nobles whispered when they thought she could not hear, though of course she heard everything. "A blind queen," one woman murmured during a gathering. "How will she manage the court? How will she even know who she is speaking to?" Alara said nothing, but later, when the same woman approached her directly, sweet-voiced and false, Alara said calmly, "I may not see your face, my lady, but I hear very well, and I heard exactly what you said about me an hour ago." The woman went silent, and word spread quickly that the new queen was not as helpless as they had assumed. Slowly, without either of them fully realizing it, small moments began to build between Alara and Draven. One evening, as she made her way down the long staircase toward the dining hall, her foot slipped on a loose stone. Before she could even react, strong hands caught her, steadying her instantly. "You should be more careful," Draven said, his voice rough, though his hands lingered a moment longer than necessary. "I did not know you were behind me," Alara said, catching her breath. "I wasn't," he admitted. "I was ahead of you." He had turned back the moment he sensed her stumble, faster than should have been possible. Neither of them spoke of it again, but the memory stayed with both of them. Another time, during a tense council meeting, one of the lords grew loud and aggressive, pushing for a decision that would have hurt the smaller villages. Alara, sitting quietly at Draven's side as was expected of her, spoke up. "He is lying," she said simply. "Listen to his voice. It shakes when he speaks of the trade numbers. He has something to gain from this decision that he is not telling us." The room fell silent. Draven studied the Lord's face and saw the flicker of guilt Alara had heard in his voice. Further investigation proved her right. The Lord had been manipulating the trade agreements for his own benefit. After that day, the council began to look at Alara differently, and so did Draven. But not everyone welcomed the growing respect for the blind queen. Lady Muriel, a noblewoman who had once hoped to become queen herself, watched with growing anger as Alara gained influence in the court. She began spreading rumors, first quietly, then more boldly, claiming that a blind queen was a weakness the kingdom could not afford, that she would embarrass Valemore before other kingdoms, that Draven had been forced into a mistake he would soon regret. Draven heard the rumors and, to his own surprise, felt a sharp flash of anger on Alara's behalf. He had not expected to feel protective of her. He had told himself this marriage was simply an arrangement, but something in him refused to let the insults stand. "You will not speak of the queen that way again," he told Muriel coldly, in front of the court. "Not in my kingdom." Muriel bowed her head, humiliated, but her resentment only grew deeper, and it would not remain harmless for long. One night, as the palace slept, Alara woke suddenly, her senses sharp with unease. Something felt wrong. A strange scent drifted through her room, faint but unfamiliar. She rose quietly, reaching for the wall to guide herself, when she heard the soft creak of her door. Before she could call out, Draven burst into the room, his wolf's instincts screaming through him. He had felt it too, a surge of danger pulling him from sleep, an invisible thread connecting him to her fear. "Someone is here," he said, low and urgent, stepping between Alara and the darkened corner of the room. A figure lunged from the shadows, a blade catching dim moonlight. Draven moved faster than thought, shifting in a blur of motion, his wolf form crashing into the attacker before the blade could reach Alara. The fight was short and brutal. When it ended, the intruder lay defeated, and guards rushed in at the sound of the struggle. It was later discovered that Muriel had hired the assassin, desperate and consumed by jealousy, hoping to remove Alara and reclaim the position she believed should have been hers. She was arrested and cast out of the kingdom, her plot exposed. Draven, still breathing hard from the fight, knelt beside Alara, gently checking that she was unharmed. His hands trembled slightly, something she had never felt from him before. "You're safe," he said quietly. "I won't let anything happen to you." Alara reached out, her fingers finding his face for the first time. tracing the lines of concern etched there. "You came for me," she whispered. "My wolf knew you were mine before I did," Draven admitted, his voice raw with something he had kept buried for years. "I fought it because I was afraid. I had loved before, and it broke me. I told myself I would never let anyone close again. But from the moment I touched your hand, I could not deny what I felt." Ilara's breath caught. "I thought you saw me only as an obligation." "I was wrong," he said. "You are not a burden placed upon me. You are the one thing my wolf knew I needed, long before I was brave enough to admit it myself." In the days that followed, everything between them changed. Draven no longer kept his distance. He sought her out, walked with her through the gardens, listened as she described the world through sound and feeling, a perspective he had never considered before. He found himself in awe of her strength, her sharp mind, and the quiet courage she carried every single day. Ilara, in turn, allowed herself to trust him fully for the first time. She no longer braced herself for indifference or coldness. She felt, in his voice, in his touch, in the steady presence beside her, something she had never expected to find in a marriage built on debt and duty. Love. Weeks later, the court gathered once more, this time not for a political ceremony, but for something far more meaningful. Draven stood before his people, Ilara's hand held gently in his. "When I married Ilara, I did so out of duty," he announced, his voice carrying across the hall. "But my wolf saw what I could not. It recognized her as my true mate before I ever gave her a chance. I stand before you today not as a king fulfilling an arrangement, but as a man completing a bond I choose with my whole heart." He turned to Ilara, his voice softening. "You were never a burden forced upon me. You are the queen my kingdom needed, and the mate my heart needed, even before I knew it myself." Ilara smiled, her sightless eyes shining with emotion the entire court could see clearly, even if she could not. "I could not see you when we first met," she said, "but I have never needed my eyes to know your heart. I heard it, in every quiet kindness, in every moment you protected me, in every word you were afraid to say until now." The court erupted into applause, and for the first time since his mother's passing, the palace of Valemore felt warm, alive, and full of hope. The blind Omega, once forced into a marriage of obligation, had become the queen the kingdom needed. And the ruthless Alpha King, once closed off from love, had found in her the one bond his wolf had recognized from the very beginning. Together, they ruled not with fear, but with strength, built on trust, respect, and a love neither of them had expected, but both of them would treasure for the rest of their lives.